Should I get that on right? Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know it's hard to come out on a weeknight, but this is such an important topic, and I appreciate being invited to talk to you about a book that I wrote. Father mentioned it, Desist, Detrans, and Detox, Getting Your Child Out of the Gender Cult. And my organization, Partners for Ethical Care, we thought long and hard about whether to put the word cult in the title, because that's very provocative, but it really is the right word. What's happening to kids right now is they're being indoctrinated into the cult of gender. And it's happening through social media, through schools, through friend groups, but primarily it's the Gender Sexuality Allies clubs that we have in schools now. I would imagine most middle and high schools have them. Those are indoctrination centers. That's where kids are getting sucked in, and I'll talk a little bit later about how that's happening. But I also want to say at the outset, social media, I am a firm believer that no child should have social media, and I'm right on the edge of saying no adult should have it either. It's incredibly unhealthy, and this is what's spurring a lot of what we're seeing with our kids right now. So I'm just going to go through what's in the book. I'm going to touch on each one of these chapters. The first chapter talks about why this is a cult and how it's a cult of identity. And that's really what cults do. One of the primary things they do is subvert your true identity and put on top of you the identity that they want you to have. And that's what's happening with gender. You hear these kids talk, they all sound the same. They all say the same things. They say the same slogans. Trans people are being murdered at alarming rates, which is not true. Trans women are women, which is not true. I've always felt this way my whole life. We never saw any evidence of it. It's this script that they're being sold, that they're being given. And I talk to parents across the country and around the world, and all of the kids are saying and doing the same things. It's very cultic, and I want to just keep impressing that upon people. This is a cult. And if you have a child or a loved one who's dealing with this, it's very easy, I think, to get angry at the child for being so intractable and militant and difficult, but appreciate that they have been drawn into a cult. You're dealing with a cult member. The next two chapters, 2 and 3, are really about just sort of parenting, how to improve your relationship with your child, how to have productive conversations. One of the things that's so important for parents and families who are dealing with this is pushing back on the narrative in a loving, kind, and compassionate way. Kids are no longer taught in school how to think. They're taught what to think. And I would say that's gone back a long time. I came through school in the 70s and 80s, and it really wasn't until I married my husband, who is an expert on debate and loves arguing. And I didn't when we got married, but 22 years in, I'm on it. I'm on it. So he has taught me how to debate and how to argue, and I really realized I didn't learn how to think. I didn't learn how to be logical coming through public school, and our kids really aren't either. So these two chapters, Conversations and Relationship, are about the questions to ask, the way to nurture your relationship, because the child's brain has really been turned off. They've been sucked into this cult and told this is all true, and anything outside the cult is untrue, it's hateful, it's toxic, you don't want to have anything to do with that. And also, kids are getting sucked into this for a variety of reasons, but one of them is the love and affection and inclusiveness that they feel when they join the transgender community. Another thing that cults do is love bomb members. They love bomb new recruits. We all are wired to want to be loved and affirmed and cared for. And these GSA clubs and the social media influencers are really doing this. That's why you hear brave and stunning all the time. Wouldn't we all like to be told that we're brave and stunning and loved and valid and worthwhile? It's all part of the love bombing. And so we need to be able to show our kids that we love them, and also to be able to help them to start thinking critically about this. So that leads into chapter 4. I go through a plan of how to deprogram a child, and I'll go into that a little more detail as we look at each chapter. Then love, unfailing love. There's a lot of ways this requires you to love that you may not have experienced or done before. This affects the whole family. I do a video series with another woman from my organization. We do it for parents, and we did an episode on siblings who are dealing with transgender-related issues with their brothers or sisters. I could not find anything on that topic except how to get the siblings to support and affirm and come along in line with the transgender agenda, which is not the right thing to do, of course. But siblings have very specific needs. This is very hard on marriages. This is hard on grandparents. This is straight out of Satan's war room. I have never seen anything that putrefies everything it touches the way gender does. This destroys everything, everyone, and the whole family is affected by it. And even after a child desists, there's still healing that needs to take place. There's still growth, there's still care and love that you need to learn how to do that to help your child fully desist. Thank you, you're so good at moving slides forward. So, chapter 1, why is it a cult? There are 8 things that cults do.
I can't pause this because it's recording.
Things. Gender hits every one of them. Okay. Identify potential recruits. I have heard more parents talking about what teachers talking about this, parents talking about being taught how to find kids to pull into the gender cult. There was a counselor in California who was caught on tape talking to other parents and counselors about how to start GSA, Gender Sexuality Ally Clubs, and she said, we poach kids from the counseling department. They know they're getting the kids who are in trouble. There was a friend of mine in DC who went to a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting for theater. It was for elementary, middle school, and community theaters. And she thought this was going to be about inclusiveness for race and religions. And no, it was all trans. The whole evening was trans. They were told, stand in the hallway and see who's alone at their locker. Go to the lunchroom, see who's eating alone. Those are the kids you can talk to about gender and sexuality. That's grooming. That's child sexual predation, and that is grooming. So they're identifying the potential recruits, drawing them in. Come to the GSA club. Come to our equity meeting. Come have a part in this play where we're going to have all the boys play girl parts and all the girls play boy parts. If you start watching high school, middle school, community theater plays, parts are being assigned irrespective of gender. That might be okay if I didn't know it was being done intentionally to unseat kids' understanding of what it is to be a boy, a girl, a man, a woman. Love bombing, as I talked about already, they love bomb the recruits. Sell, sell, sell. If you walk down a hall in school right now, middle school or high school, what do you see on the walls? Rainbows, pride flags, transgender flags. I did this at my kids' high school before I polled. I have now polled all my kids to homeschool. But right when I was getting ready to poll, I went and walked the halls. About 50% of the teacher stores had "This is a safe space" stickers on them. Everywhere, nothing gets as much marketing real estate as sex and gender in schools. Hard love is where you've got to come along with this ideology or you're not part of the group. If anybody makes a misstep, if you misgender somebody, you've got to really apologize profusely and make up for it. The renunciation of loved ones. I highlighted 3 and 6 because these are so powerful. This is cutting kids off from their families intentionally. The name change, that rejects the very first gifts your parents gave you. Except for the gift of life, the first thing your parents gave you is a name. That's they're being told to change their own names, make their own names. That name is your dead name. When kids do this, they're told, if your parents don't affirm this unconditionally, they don't love you. You need to go find your own glitter family. You need to make your own family. My colleague was just at a Planned Parenthood, or she zoomed into a Planned Parenthood meeting, and the people at Planned Parenthood were saying that the families you make for yourself are even more important than your family of origin. Your family of origin isn't important at all, and we know that's not true. We know that the family is the most important thing for society, for children. I'm preaching to the crowd here, so I'll move on. Introduce and coerce acceptance of core beliefs. That's all those things we were talking about. Trans women are women. You are what you think you are. Nobody's allowed to question you. And zero tolerance of criticism. These are common to all cults, and gender does every one of them. How am I doing on time? I didn't even look to see when I started. I'm halfway through? Okay, I'm halfway through. So I'll go speedily through the next few chapters. Conversations with your child. What's the difference between feelings and reasoning, feelings and logic? That's important. Learning how to address the logic problems in trans ideology. There are many. It takes very little time to bump into a logic problem. How to set boundaries with your kids. What's the difference between control and influence? This is motivation theory. A lot of this is coming out from my background in educational psychology. And when I started hearing from all these experts that, oh, you have to affirm this or the child's going to commit suicide, I thought that does not jibe with anything I know about child development. Okay, I'm gonna have the next slide. Relationship skills, and this chapter also talks about different ways of handling whether you have small children, middle school children, or older teenager, adult children. A caveat, my book doesn't really go into adults who are doing this. I know there are more and more reports of husbands and wives who are announcing trans identities and leaving their families. I do not know if this material will help in that case. I suspect it will not, but I do address different ages of children. The strategy for deprogramming. Figure out what happened. Kids have a variety of reasons why they get sucked into this, why this is appealing to them. Figure out what happened. Is the child autistic? Did the child have a trauma? Is the child depressed? There's a panoply of reasons why this is appealing, and knowing what made that child susceptible to it will help inform how to pull that child out. Also, the second thing is sorting out the protagonists and antagonists. There are many, many antagonists. Social media is an antagonist. The schools are antagonists by and large. There are many good teachers in schools, but they are being silenced. And by and large, schools are promoting this. So figuring out who is on my side in getting my child back and who is not on my side, and trying to cut off those negative influences to the greatest degree you can, and surrounding your child with the positive influences. And then re-engaging the child's mind and critical thinking skills with that village of healthy people. The chapter on love, we don't really know what love is, a lot of us in society today. It's been made into a lot of things that it's not. But this chapter really talks about how to love your child unconditionally, but with firmness. That love is not a doormat. You got to stick the course. This can be a really long, painful process, and so you need to love yourself through it as well. Okay, next chapter, please. I talked about this a little earlier, caring for the needs of the family. This is tearing marriages apart. This is separating parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. I just had coffee with a friend yesterday she has a child who announced a transgender identity, and the bulk of her family was all for it and couldn't understand why she didn't think this was brave and stunning. Her child has now desisted, and the rest of the family just can't really quite accept that. They're blaming the parents for being putting pressure on the child, and basically saying that the parents brainwashed the child. And so this woman, several of her aunts and cousins have cut her off completely over this issue. And I hear this all the time. This isn't at all an unusual thing. I also talk about finding a trustworthy therapist in this chapter. Those are harder and harder to find. As I was talking to a woman who retired from the therapy field, and it is very hard to find therapists who will treat a child ethically, who will deal with the true issues and not just go straight to transing. Okay, next. And then I mentioned earlier, after desisting, there's a lot that still needs to be healed. Coming out of a cult, the child needs to rediscover who they are. If they've been in the cult for 2 or 3 years, say a child went into it at age 12, came out at 15, that's 3 years of normal maturation that child has missed. He or she is not the same person at the end that they were at the beginning. And there's a lot of nurturing and helping that child rediscover who they truly are And especially as Christians, as people who know Christ, we know we were given our bodies. We were given our identity in Christ. And so for children who have that foundation in Christ, I think they really have a leg up on healing through this. I think I have one more slide. Or is that the end? If that's the end, I'm doing great on time. Okay, a few other books that my organization has, and I brought them. They're over here at the table. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And again, I appreciate y'all coming out tonight. This is a weighty subject. It's not something any of us really wanted to deal with, but God has a lot to say about this, and it's going to be people who know him who do a lot of the healing.